What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to talk about my wide receiver and tight end starts and sits for the week. If you guys missed yesterday's video, I basically went over every backfield, every matchup this week in fantasy football, week 2 of fantasy football, and I broke down each backfield, which running backs you should start, sit, flex, whatever the case is. Well, I'm doing the same thing today with the pass catchers, with the wide receivers, with the tight ends. Of course, as you guys know, I'm going to be going over every matchup, talking about which wide receivers and tight ends you should start and sit, and also going over the wide receiver cornerback matchups and some of the utilization reports that we saw in week 1 of fantasy football. So the obvious names that I talk about, I'm going to probably skim over because you guys know to start those guys, but we'll get it deep, sort through some of these murky wide receiver situations together. I'm going to make reference to my weekly rankings a lot. If you guys want access to our weekly rankings, and this is kind of a mini announcement before we get into this, but there's now 3 ways you can get access to our weekly rankings. There was only 2 before. First way you can get access to our weekly rankings is you can go to our website for $20 USD. You can buy our weekly rankings on the website and we'll get you set up. Number 2, you can go to underdogfantasy.com and deposit using promo code FSE. You'll get $10 on top of whatever you deposit on the site to play with, and you'll also get our weekly rankings for free. And number 3, and this is the new way, patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. As you guys know, and maybe if you don't know, we have launched a Patreon page. We never had one before. So patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. If you guys want to go and support us there, the first tier called Ladster, named after the Ladster himself, will get you access to our weekly rankings. It's also a general support tier. We'll get you access to our Discord server, which is now closed. First dibs on Dynasty Decisions. If you guys want to, be a part of Dynasty Decisions, you'll get first dibs on that. First dibs on start sit advice. And the big thing, we'll also be having a private live stream every Saturday afternoon at noon Eastern once we get some people to sign up for this tier. So again, if you guys want to support us in any way, you want to get some access to some cool features, go ahead and sign up for the Ladster tier. The Tone Setter tier is the big boy. That'll actually get you access to like voting power, a Twitter group chat with me and Danny, and it'll also give you access to be in the live stream. You can come on camera and ask us your questions on Saturday. So a lot of cool things going on at patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. Go check that out. But without further ado, that's enough housekeeping. Let's hit the intro and let's get right into this. Okay, so we're going to start by going through each game. As I mentioned, Thursday Night Football, the first game we have here, Giants at the Washington Football Team. With each game that goes on, I'm going to talk about who to start, who to sit, who to flex, etc. I'm going to go through some of the utilization that is notable from week 1, if there was any, and then also go through what their wide receiver cornerback matchups are this week and my thoughts on the players as a whole. So let's start with the Giants Washington Football Team, Thursday Night Football. You're going to be starting Terry McLaurin, flexing Kenny Golladay, and sitting Sterling Shepard, and then obviously sitting anybody else that I don't mention in the game. As you guys can see, I am not excited about these Giants wide receivers. This game could get ugly, in my opinion. According to Pro Football Focus, the Giants offensive line has a minus 44% disadvantage to the Washington Football Team's defensive line. We know Chase Young, Montez Sweat, all those guys are going to get after Daniel Jones in this game. I don't think the Giants are going to score a lot. I have Golladay wide receiver 38 right now, so just inside that top 40 range, which makes him flex worthy, but a guy I'm not excited about this week. And Sterling Shepard I have at 49 because, as you guys can see on the screen, the matchup chart, courtesy of PFF, Kendall Fuller is a good corner. He's not the same level of corner that he played against the Broncos last week, so I'm expecting Sterling Shepard to have a down game in this one, and probably it'll be tough for him to repeat what he did in week 1. On the Washington Football Team side of things, PFF does expect James Bradberry to shadow Terry McLaurin, so that moves Terry McLaurin down the rankings pretty significantly for me. He's probably in that 15 to 20 range, whereas he'd normally be in that top 12. But Terry McLaurin gets moved around the formation quite a bit. He went 7 for 115 and a touchdown against the Giants once last year, with only 36 yards coming against James Bradberry. So they're going to, make a concerted effort to get him off of James Bradberry, but he will be shadowed by him for the most part in this game. At the tight end position, as I said, I'm going to talk about both wide receivers and tight ends. Tight ends, a lot less analysis because they're pretty straightforward, but obviously you guys know to start Logan Thomas if you have him and sit all the Giants tight ends. Logan Thomas had a 93% route rate and a 16% target share in week 1. So that is tremendous news if you guys drafted Logan Thomas, and I actually have him in one of my redraft leagues, because with Curtis Samuel out, he's going back to that target share slot role that he had last year. And I think he's a fantastic buy low candidate. If you guys are in need of a tight end, maybe you drafted Mike Gesicki or something and he's not working out, go and see what you can get Logan Thomas for, because there's a chance that somebody maybe drafted him as their second tight end in some of your more casual leagues. So Thomas is a guy that I really like this week. So to the next game that we have here, that is the Raiders at the Steelers. In this game, you're going to be starting both of the main Steelers wide receivers, Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. I would sit everybody else personally, Juju, Henry Ruggs, Bryan Edwards, anybody else in this game. On the Steelers side of things, I expect them to throw to win this game because the Raiders defense is not a good defense really against the pass. And that 4 for 52 stat line and 0 touchdown that we saw from Juju Smith-Schuster last week is exactly what I expect out of Juju Smith-Schuster every game. I think he's going to be a 7-8 target receiver, but much like Sterling Shepard, I don't think he has a high weekly ceiling. He's a low upside play that I don't want any part of. He's going to be in my wide receiver 40 to 55 range pretty much every single week. With the other two wide receivers, though, you can fire up Deontay Johnson, fire up Chase Claypool. Both of these guys are in great spots to win their matchups, as you guys can see on the screen. Deontay Johnson against Trayvon Mullen, Chase Claypool against Casey Hayward. Chase Claypool is a much bigger receiver than Casey Hayward is a corner. He also has a pretty big speed advantage on him too. So I think this could be a big game for Chase Claypool, but both him and Deontay are in great spots to win their matchups with Deontay Johnson's route running and Chase Claypool's size and speed advantage that he has in this game. On the Raiders side of things, again, I wouldn't start any of these guys, but these are the matchups. If you guys were curious, if you have to start Bryan Edwards or something like that, he is the guy I would start if you have to start one of them. But Ruggs also, if you need a big play, I suppose, isn't the worst start in the world, but the matchups are on the screen in case you guys were curious. So at the tight end position, this is a straightforward answer. You start Darren Waller because he is Darren Waller. He's a stud, could finish as the number 1 tight end this year. And the Steelers tight ends, I don't really want any part of as of right now. I think Freiermuth could take over that starting job as the season goes along, but as of right now, it's a pretty dead even split between him and Eric Ebron. So I'm not really interested in starting a guy like Pat Freiermuth this week. So the 49ers at the Eagles, the next game that we have here, flex Deebo Samuel, flex Devontae Smith, and flex Brandon Ayuk. So all these guys are inside my top 35 wide receivers, but none of them are inside my top 24. I currently have Devontae Smith at wide receiver 30, Deebo Samuel at wide receiver 32. Brandon Ayuk, I'm willing to take the plunge. I have him at 36. So he's a guy that I am willing to start. I know it was really nerve-wracking what we've heard all week, what we saw last week. Hopefully Ayuk can get his head out of his ass if that's what the problem is. Sounds like Kyle Shanahan is challenging him to step up and take over this number 1 receiver job. So monitor this situation closely. Again, if we keep hearing really negative things about Brandon Ayuk up until kickoff, then I definitely could move him down my rankings and maybe you're starting more fringe options like Jacoby Myers over him or something like that. But until then, I'm going to trust that Brandon Ayuk will get his head out of his ass, basically. And Deebo Samuel, as long as this Brandon Ayuk situation is going to be lingering, is a guy that is, again, inside that top 32 range that I have him at. The matchups on the screen right now, as you can see, Deebo Samuel is set to see Avonte Maddox in coverage, Brandon Ayuk on Darius Slay. So definitely stands to be a bit more of a Deebo game in this one, especially if Brandon Ayuk is going to continue to be limited, obviously. And then on the Philadelphia Eagles side of things, the one thing I was very excited to see was the usage out of Devontae Smith, because as you guys can see on the screen, Devontae Smith ran 95% of the Eagles routes, and Jalen Reagor was the number 2 receiver at 71%. And then after him, it was kind of a committee between Quez Watkins and some of the other guys that they have there. So Devontae being a bona fide number 1 receiver in his first NFL game is something that is very exciting to see. Again, he was one of my big breakout candidates in my top breakout candidates video. A 23% target share, 95% route participation in his first game will only solidify that status for me. I think he's a guy that is worth buying high on because I think he could have a phenomenal rookie season. The matchups on the screen right now, Demondor Lenore, I can't even pronounce his name, but he is the primary matchup Devontae Smith is supposed to see in this game. Again, I probably wouldn't start Quez Watkins or Jalen Reagor, so Smith is the main guy that we're concerned with. He's going to kind of just be moved on either side of the formation in this game. At the tight end position, we have 2 tight ends that are both inside my top 10. George Kittle, obviously you start every single week, but Dallas Goedert is still a top 10 tight end for me because he ran 68% of the routes to Zach Ertz's 56. He's still a starting tight end option for me, obviously, but I am still a little concerned with Goddard. I would start guys like Robert Tonyan ahead of him. I would start Noah Fant, Rob Gronkowski, even if you wanted to get a little gutty in this one. So that's kind of where I'm at with Goddard. I think he's still a startable tight end, but he's not a guy that I'm super, super excited about if he is my main guy. So Texans at Browns, the next game that we have here with Jarvis Landry and Brandon Cooks. Those are the 2 guys that I'm really only interested in this game, with Odell Beckham Jr. out for this game yet again, which is really surprising to me because, I mean, I had Dr. Edwin Porras on the channel right before the season started, and he said he wasn't concerned about Odell Beckham at all because all we had heard all offseason was positive things about Odell Beckham, and now he's just missing games all of a sudden. So he must have had a setback or something of that nature, but With Jarvis Landry, he's set to see a lot of Desmond King in coverage in the slot against the Houston Texans secondary. I think he should be fine in this game, though. Should be an 8 to 10 target type of option. Great guy to throw into your flex position. Brandon Cooks is clearly a number one on this Texans receiving core and set to see an even mix of all three corners. There's no real primary matchup that he's going to be going up against because he's moved all over the place. As you guys can see on the screen, though, the Texans wide receiver usage is encouraging to see for a guy like Nico Collins, who was a sleeper of mine coming into the season, 75% of the routes, and also a decent amount of, he got an end zone target. He got some of the play action targets in this game. So I think he's the number 2 receiver in this offense. Now, I don't know how valuable the number 2 receiver in this offense is, but he is worth a stash at the end of your bench if you guys are in need of some upside at wide receiver, because we know Brandon Cooks has been prone to injuries in the past, and Nico Collins kind of fits the same kind of mold of receiver that Brandon Cooks is. So if he were to miss time, then Nico Collins could see a big time uptick. At tight end, the Browns tight ends, I wouldn't start any of them. Njoku, Hooper, Harrison Bryant, none of these guys, they're all kind of in like a committee right now. So Hooper is the guy that I think is the most valuable, but again, not a guy that I want to start currently. I have him at like tight end 20 on the week, and the Texans don't have any relevant tight ends, so don't worry about them. The Broncos at the Jaguars, the next game that we have on the docket here. Courtland Sutton is an auto start now with Jerry Jeudy out of the lineup, and flex all 3 Jags wide receivers. I'll start with Courtland Sutton. If you picked up KJ Hamler or Tim Patrick in Judy's absence, fine. I think they're good pickups, but if you can, I would wait a week before playing any of these guys to see who plays the most snaps, who gets the most targets, things of that nature, because I don't know for sure who it's going to be. Is it going to be Hamler? Is it going to be Tim Patrick? Although I do lean KJ Hamler because he is a guy that I liked coming out of Penn State, and he's a second-year wide receiver, could see a big bump with Jerry Jeudy out. So as you guys can see on the screen, Courtland Sutton is set to see CJ Henderson in coverage, who, had a pretty good rookie season, but I think Courtland Sutton should be able to take care of him. He did see James Bradbury in shadow coverage last week, which was definitely a much tougher matchup than what we're seeing with CJ Henderson. So that is definitely good to see for Courtland Sutton. On the Jags side of things, we can see that we didn't get really a whole lot of clarity on which Jags wide receivers are going to be the most valuable. As you can see, Marvin Jones ran the most routes. DJ Chark had the most targets. Laviska Shenault was targeted, when he was on the field. He was used as a low ADOT option, basically a gadget type of receiver that we knew he definitely could be used as. So as of right now, DJ Chark is the guy that I have ranked highest because he did see 12 targets last week. He, as I talked about all offseason, he's the deep threat of this offense. He's going to have the highest ADOT, as you guys can see, with the 16.3 ADOT that he had. So he's a good chance for a big play, but I'm not excited about what I saw out of the Jags offense in week 1. I think they could be a bit down big in this game, which will lend itself to more targets, but I don't think they're going to be very efficient targets, as we saw from Chark last week, who had 12 targets, but only cashed in on a couple of those. So as you can see on the screen, the wide receiver cornerback matchups are as follows. Bryce Callahan versus Laviska Shenault, kind of a tough matchup for him. Callahan's a really good slot corner. DJ Chark versus Mike Ford. I think he has the best matchup on the field right now, and Kyle Fuller versus Marvin Jones. So I think this could be a big DJ Chark week. If you guys are playing DFS, for example, you could throw DJ Chark into a tournament lineup. And then at tight end in this game, you start Noah Fant and you sit all the Jags tight ends. I think the biggest winner of the Jeudy injury, in my opinion, was Noah Fant. As you can see, he ran 66% of the routes for the Denver Broncos at tight end in this game, and he had a 21% target share in this game. So with Jerry Jeudy out, who is the only other receiver on the Broncos last week who had a 20+% target share, Noah Fant, even his 8 targets that he had last week, could be a staple for him going forward. And of course, we know he's super athletic. He can make big plays happen as well. So he's a guy that could move into borderline top 5 tight end range for the rest of the season, as long as Jerry Jeudy's going to continue to be out. Now, of course, we don't know how long Jerry Jeudy's going to be out. We've heard 4 to 6 weeks. I've heard 6 to 8 weeks at some point. So Fant is a guy that if you have him, which I do in my main big money league that I care the most about, I'm over the moon with the Jerry Jeudy injury, obviously from the Fant perspective. So that's definitely good news for Noah Fant fantasy managers. So the Saints at the Panthers, the next game that we have on the docket here, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are 2 guys that are in your lineup. Low end flex, a guy like Marquez Callaway. As you guys can see on the screen, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson ran the most routes for the Panthers, so they still are the number 1 and 2 receiver on this team. Of course, Terrace Marshall did run a decent amount of routes as well, so something to keep an eye on if you're stashing Terrace Marshall. I was definitely encouraged with what I saw out of Sam Darnold in his Panthers debut, but this is a bigger test, a much better defense that he's playing against. So let's see how he does against the New Orleans Saints in this game. As you guys can see the matchups on the screen right now, I think this could be a, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore game as it was last week. DJ Moore against Paulson Adebo, mostly in coverage. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is probably the best corner on the Saints with Marshawn Lattimore out for this game. So I think I really like both of these guys, Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore in this game. I can't start Terrace Marshall quite yet. I don't think he's quite there from a usage standpoint. So he's a guy that I'm more willing to stash than I am willing to start. So just keep him on the end of your bench for now. As you guys can see with the Saints side of things, Marquez Callaway, while he didn't get a lot of targets in this game or any big plays or anything like that, he did run 88% of the routes. So he is the number one receiver on this team from a usage standpoint. So he is worth throwing into your low end flex play if you need him. But I would say he's more likely a guy that I'm willing to sit pat and wait on if I can. So Marquez Callaway, a guy you could throw into your lineup, but not a guy that I'm excited to start. I currently have him around that wide receiver 50 range in my rankings. In this game, there's no tight ends worth starting. You can stash Adam Troutman as a late round tight end option, I suppose, but I would not be, stashing Jawan Johnson. I wouldn't be starting Dan Arnold or anything in this game. Troutman ran 72% of the routes, so he is the tight end to own in this tight end room, but not a guy I'm overly excited about at the tight end position. Now to the Rams at the Colts. You start both Rams wide receivers and you sit all the Colts wide receivers. This is a pretty straightforward one for me. As you guys can see on the screen, the one usage thing that was really weird about week one is that Van Jefferson ran 20% more routes than Robert Woods, which I found really strange. I think it's really weird that happened, but Van Jefferson is a guy that I would, stash in your league, keep him on the end of your bench. I don't think I would necessarily start him in this game, but he definitely did show a lot with Matthew Stafford as the kind of deep threat of this offense. So he's a guy that I'm definitely willing to stash, but Woods and Kupp are the two that I'm starting in this game. Looks like Woods has the better matchup against Rocky Sin. So could be a Robert Woods game and maybe a little bit more of a down game for Cooper Kupp in this game. So with the Colts, you guys can see the usage on the screen there. Michael Pittman Jr. and Zach Pascal look to be the number one and number two receiver for this team. But the issue is that they're going to see Jalen Ramsey and Darius Williams on the outside. And Pittman specifically, in my opinion, he just hasn't shown the ability to command targets. I know it's it's really popular to say that nobody else is going to catch the ball there, and that's why Michael Pittman can be good, but it's a real skill to command targets. You have to get open. You have to create separation. You have to be reliable for your quarterback to throw the ball to you, and I just haven't seen that out of Michael Pittman yet. I didn't see it last year when he had opportunity, and I didn't see it in week one. So again, if you can get somebody to buy into Michael Pittman and you drafted him, I would try and take Michael Pittman and maybe another piece and upgrade at wide receiver if you're able to. Maybe you can take Michael Pittman and Rondell Moore or something and upgrade to a Robbie Anderson or upgrade to a Will Fuller or something like that. I would probably try to make a move like that if I can. So the tight end position in this game, you start Tyler Higbee, ran 93% of the routes for the Rams on Sunday night, which is great to see. And then sit all the Colts tight ends. None of them are really too much of interest to me. So the Bills at Dolphins, the next game that we have on the docket here, start Diggs, flex Beasley, and Fuller and Jalen Waddle. So a lot of flex options in this game, but Diggs is the only true locked-in starter for your lineups. As you guys can see on the screen, it was a clear three-man wide receiver core with the Buffalo Bills, 94%, 98%, and 98% of the routes for the Bills' top three receivers. If you guys are stashing Gabe Davis, I would probably recommend that you only get the expectation in your head that he's only going to be valuable if one of these guys gets hurt, because he's simply the wide receiver 4 on this team. That's the only way I can put it, because Diggs, Beasley, and Emmanuel Sanders are ahead of him on the depth chart. Do not worry about Stephon Diggs if you were worried about him. Cole Beasley is still an every week starter, every week flex play, in my opinion, with his target share. He had a 27% target share in the game last week and in a great matchup, as you guys can see, against Nick Needham in the slot. It looks like it could be a big Cole Beasley game with Byron Jones presumably on Stephon Diggs, Xavier Howard on Emmanuel Sanders. None of those guys are really going to have a great matchup on the outside. So Cole Beasley could have a lot of targets, could have a big game in the slot for Josh Allen and the Bills offense. On the Dolphins side of things, of course, we have Will Fuller coming back from suspension this week. He was suspended the first game of this year following his PED suspension, where he served 5 games last year. So what I'm really most concerned with is, because I really love what I saw to Jalen Waddle in week one, but I think Fuller is going to be the number one receiver there. I talked about it all offseason. Both guys are flex worthy in this game. I have Fuller at 35 and Waddle at 45. So both of these guys are worthy of starting. As you guys can see on the screen, Fuller is set to see Levi Wallace in coverage, Jalen Waddle with Teron Johnson. Both guys should be able to get it done in that matchup. I know it says, below average and poor in these games, but that's only because Fuller doesn't have a PFF grade from the first week and things of that nature. So overall, I think this Miami Dolphins receiving core is really going to, be sorted out after this week when Will Fuller is on the field. then we'll probably truly know what we have in Fuller and with Waddle. Sit all the tight ends in this game. I wasn't big on Mike Gesicki coming into the season. It's a split tight end room between him and Smythe and Long, along with Mike Gesicki. So I think he's actually a guy that you can drop if you guys need a better tight end. If Jared Cook is available, if Cole Kmet is available, I would drop Mike Gesicki for those guys. I think they're better options. Maybe even Rob Gronkowski or something is available in your league. So Mike Gesicki, not a guy I have a lot of confidence in. Now to the Patriots at the Jets. Start Corey Davis in this game. Flex Jacoby Myers in this game. And you could probably desperation play Elijah Moore and Nelson Agholor if you guys wanted to. I have them at 49 and 50 respectively in my rankings. But the more important guys in this game, Corey Davis, he looked phenomenal in this first matchup against the Panthers. Elijah Moore struggled a little bit for the Jets, but they were the clear number 1 and number 2 in this offense, running 87% and 85% of the routes respectively. So they are the clear number 1 and 2 target for Zach Wilson in this Jets offense. Corey Davis being the veteran receiver, I expect to be a lot better for fantasy early on in the season while Elijah Moore gets his legs under him. JC Jackson is expected to shadow Corey Davis in coverage. So maybe Elijah Moore has his first big game in this one because Corey Davis is going to have a tougher matchup against JC Jackson. Jacoby Myers on the Patriots side of things is the number 1 here, in my opinion. 6.4 ADOT. He's the possession guy in this offense. Nelson Agholor is the deep threat, 13.2 ADOT in this first game. 95% of the routes for Jacoby Myers, 95% for Nelson Agholor. Jacoby Myers is set to see the cornerback version of Michael Carter in this game. So I actually expect a pretty big game out of Jacoby Myers. He's a guy that I think is a great, low-end DFS play if you guys are playing DFS this week. At tight end position, never Jets tight ends. Don't start Tyler Kroft or anything like that. Jonnu Smith is a streamable tight end in this game. I have him, I think, tight end 15 on the week. But I think the big concerning thing for me of Jonnu Smith is the fact that he and Hunter Henry kind of split routes, 45% for Jonnu, 55% for Hunter Henry. And Jonnu got the targets in this game, 14% and 8% for Hunter Henry. But there's a chance that Hunter Henry just out targets Jonnu this week. And then we have a huge mess of a situation on our hands. So a guy that I think you can throw into your lineup in Jonnu Smith, but not a guy that I'm overly excited about, a guy that I'm, beating down the door to get into my lineup in this one. So the Bengals at the Bears, the next game that we have here, again, pretty straightforward. Start Allen Robinson, start T. Higgins, start Jamar Chase, flex Tyler Boyd and Darnell Mooney if you guys need them. These top guys, the top 3 guys that I just said, A-Rob, Higgins, and Chase, all 3 are in my top 30 on the week, and the other 2 sit around that 40 to 45 range. So starting with the Bengals, I want to take my foot out of my mouth real quick on Jamar Chase because he ran the most routes, he had the most targets, and the most air yards on the Bengals in his first game. 94% of the routes, 27% of the targets, 16.3 ADOT, 50% of the team's air yards. That was not what I expected out of Jamar Chase. With the down offseason, supposedly, that he was having, I expected him to get out to a bit of a slower start. I expected T. Higgins to pick up the slack, and that's not exactly what happened. Now, in this game, I think T. Higgins is the better play if I'm choosing between the Bengals receivers. Kendall Vildor versus Jalen Johnson is actually a much easier matchup for T. Higgins. So I think T. Higgins is probably the guy that has the big game in this one, but Jamar Chase also a great play inside my top 30 as well. And then Tyler Boyd, obviously a great flex play in the slot for the Bengals. On the Bears side of things, we can see that Darnell Mooney actually ran more routes than Allen Robinson. So he is, not that it was a question mark, but he is clearly the number 2 receiver on this team. 18% target share in this first game. As you guys can see the matchups on the screen right now, Allen Robinson's set to be on Cheeto Awuzie for the most part. Darnell Mooney to split time versus Mike Hilton and Eli Apple. So these guys should have good games in this one. I'm not really overly concerned about what they did last week. I think they're both going to be in a bounce back situation. And then at tight end, Cole Kmet's the dude, man. He's a borderline tight end 1 for me going forward. Uzama might be a streamer on the Bengals side of things, but Kmet, what he showed, as you guys can see on the screen, 71% of the routes for the Bears, 16% target share. That's exactly what I wanted to see out of Cole Kmet. He is clearly the tight end 1 on this team. Jimmy Graham or no Jimmy, he's the guy that I want in this tight end core for the Chicago Bears. He's a guy that I have as a borderline top 12 tight end this week. So if you guys need a tight end on the waiver wire, go check to see if Cole Kmet is there because he might be in more shallower leagues. So from the 1 p.m. games, now we're going to the 4 p.m. games. The Falcons at the Buccaneers. This one should be a pretty high-scoring affair. Start all 3 Bucs receivers in this game and start Calvin Ridley. This, in my opinion, is the quintessential Mike Evans game incoming, right? Mike Evans, we know he has these big games. We know he sometimes has disappointing games, but Mike Evans is going to have a good game in this one because, as you guys can see on the screen, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are still the number 1 and 2 receiver on this team. As I talked about all offseason, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are the 1 and 2. Antonio Brown is the 3rd receiver on this team. And I know Antonio Brown had a big game against the Cowboys, but I think that was due to the matchup versus Anthony Brown. And this is what we want to be looking at with these Buccaneers receivers each and every week is what are the matchups? Who can we expect to have the better game in this one. It's nothing against Antonio Brown, but I think this market overreaction where he might be the number one receiver in this offense is coming this week. I think we're going to get that market overreaction kind of adjusted, and it's going to go back to what we expected. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are the 1 and 2. Antonio Brown's a good flex play, but he's not the number one receiver on this team. I expect big games from these other two Bucs receivers. As you guys can see on the screen, AJ Terrell, the Falcons' best corner, is going to be on Antonio Brown. Therefore, he has the smallest matchup advantage versus Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, who have easier matchups. So I expect those guys to have big games. Antonio Brown, maybe a little bit more of a down game, but still a guy I'm throwing into my lineup. And then on the Falcons side of things, people are panicking on Calvin Ridley. And I don't think they should be, because he had shadow coverage versus Darius Slay last week. Somewhat of a difficult matchup, and the Falcons offense just looked lost in general. So I think Calvin Ridley will be just fine in this game. You pass against the Buccaneers. You don't run the ball against the Buccaneers. You have to pass the ball against them. So if Carlton Davis doesn't shadow Calvin Ridley in this game, and he's not expected to, according to PFF, I think he's going to have a monster game. If he sees any type of coverage against Jamel Dean, he is going to wipe the floor with him, because he is too good of a receiver to play against a lackluster corner, to be honest, in what Jamel Dean showed last week. So at tight end in this game, I think both guys are starters. You obviously start Kyle Pitts. I talked about it on the buy low candidates show that Kyle Pitts is a guy that saw great usage out in the slot, out wide. Everything that you wanted to see out of Kyle Pitts, you saw in week 1. So I have no hesitation throwing him back into my lineup this week. And Rob Gronkowski, man, he ran 74% of the routes for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Cowboys in week 1, which was actually more than Antonio Brown ran. I think Rob Gronkowski is in for a pretty bounce back season in terms of his tight end production. I could see him easily finishing as a top 6, top 8 tight end this year, because this offense is going to throw the ball, and they're going to be efficient when they throw the ball. So I think there's enough room for Rob Gronkowski to have a 700-yard, 8 touchdown season, and that'll probably make him a top 6 tight end on the year. So if you have Rob Gronkowski and you got him late, I think you hit the jackpot, because I think he's going to be great this year. The Vikings at the Cardinals, another game that should be pretty exciting on this slate. I think the 4 p.m. games overall are actually better this week than the 1 p.m. games. I think all the action is packed into the 4 o'clock slate. So good news there for the 7 hours of commercial-free football fans and watchers like myself. Start both of the Vikings wide receivers in this game and start DeAndre Hopkins. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward if you ask me. The Cardinals wide receiver core is just DeAndre Hopkins from a fantasy perspective right now, in my opinion. Pick your poison. If you like Rondale Moore, if you like Christian Kirk, if you like AJ Green, I like what I saw to Rondale Moore when he was given opportunities, but it's just not enough routes for him to make a big impact yet. Only running 38% of the routes is not going to get it done. And yes, he was targeted on 36% of the routes that he ran, but 38% of the routes is not going to get it done. And I think unless an injury happens, it's probably going to be D-Hop, then AJ Green. Those two are the outside receivers. Christian Kirk and Rondale Moore are going to mix in the slot. I just think that's what's going to happen. I think that's how we're going to be, operating this offense. So DeAndre Hopkins, though, as the fantasy relevant guy, he's not expected to be shadowed by Patrick Peterson, but he is the primary matchup for DeAndre Hopkins. And it shouldn't be a big issue, because I think Hopkins is a better receiver than Patrick Peterson is a corner at this point in his career. But these guys were teammates last year, so there's probably some familiarity with how each guy operates, given the fact that they practiced against each other all year last year. So that could play against D-Hop or could play in favor of D-Hop. Who the hell knows? Either way, you're not sitting them. Vikings wide receivers are in a great spot on paper, but this defense looked really good in week 1 against the Titans. They held AJ Brown and Julio Jones to very little production in this game. So I'm a little bit concerned about those guys, but Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson should still be in good spots in this game. I think Kirk Cousins also has a pretty good game in this one as well. So I think I'm starting those guys with pretty much zero concerns. At tight end, there's no fantasy relevant tight ends on either team. So I'm not worried about starting a tight end in this game. The Titans at the Seahawks, one of the last games of the 4 p.m. slate here. Start the 4 usual names, right? You guys should know who to start in this game. Julio Jones, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett. All 4 guys are in my top 24 wide receivers. You start them each and every week. This is one of the games I'll be attacking in DFS this week, because I think it has big time scoring potential. I think Russ could cook. I think Tannehill could cook. We know who the main receivers are in this game. So let's just get to the matchups to know who might go off and who might have a disappointing game. Overall, when we look at the Titans receivers versus the Seahawks corners, the biggest advantage goes from Julio Jones to Trey Flowers. So there's a good chance that Julio Jones has a bounce back game in this one. AJ Brown, also a fine start, of course. I'm guessing this is going to be a DK Metcalf game, because Jackrabbit Jenkins was absolutely abused by Hopkins last week. And I think DK Metcalf's going to do the same thing to him. So he is my wide receiver 3 on the week. Obviously, Tyler Lockett, again, could have a big game in this one versus either Fulton or Elijah Molden in the slot. So Both of those guys, great starts. Of course, I think DK Metcalf in for a big game against the Titans and what I expect to be a high-scoring affair. And speaking of high-scoring affairs, we have the Cowboys at the Chargers. Again, start everybody in this game. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. All these guys are inside my top 30 at wide receiver. This game has a 56-point over-under, which is absolutely wild in my opinion. Another big game out of Mike Williams, and I think you'll be able to sell him for some excellent options. I think if Justin Jefferson has like a down game in this one, you might be able to sell Mike Williams plus like another running back or receiver. You can sell like Mike Williams and like Myles Gaskin for Justin Jefferson or something if Mike Williams has another good game in this one. So be aware of what happens to Mike Williams in this game, because if you guys own Mike Williams, I think he is going to be a prime sell high candidate to go out and tier up from Mike Williams to a better receiver. But overall, I really like both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams in this game. Jordan Lewis and Anthony Brown as the primary matchups for those two guys. Again, what we saw what the Buccaneers receivers did to these guys, I think it's going to be tough sledding for the Cowboys secondary in this game. On the Dallas side of things, both guys are top 10 options each and every week for me. With Michael Gallup now out for a couple weeks, CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper are going to be in the top 10 of my rankings each and every single week because these guys are target monsters in one of the most pass-heavy offenses in the league. And CeeDee Lamb against Chris Harris Jr. might be a bit of a down game for him, but Amari Cooper on the outside against a rookie in Asante Samuel is probably not going to end well for him. So could be another big game out of Amari Cooper. And Amari Cooper could be a guy that you flip for Stephon Diggs or Calvin Ridley, or maybe even, Devontae Adams if he has a disappointing game in this week. So Amari Cooper, again, another guy that you want to be firing up this week. He should have another monster game. And then at tight end, Jared Cook is a good stream in this game. Clearly the number one tight end here, 63% of the routes that he ran last week, 18% target share. So wheels up on Jared Cook. Again, if he's available in your league on the waiver wire, I think he's a great pickup. I think he's a guy that I would drop Mike Gesicki for. I would drop, whoever else that you guys were stashing, Austin Hooper, for example. I would drop them for Jared Cook because I think he's going to be useful in this offense. And the Chargers have a pretty easy schedule the next couple of weeks. On Sunday Night Football, we have the Chiefs at the Ravens. Again, this one's going to be pretty straightforward. I'm not going to spend too much time in this game. Tyreek Hill, obviously you start him every single week. Hollywood Brown is going to be a good flex in this week. Hollywood Brown is set to see Mike Hughes as his primary matchup, and I think he could definitely have a big play in this game or just a big game in general. With L'Jarius Sneed and Charvarius Ward, they're better two corners on the Chiefs on Watkins and Duvernay. Marquise Brown has the better matchup, therefore he could have the better game. Tyreek Hill is Tyreek Hill. You never sit him. Highest matchup advantage on the slate at 95 overall versus Tavon Young. I think Tyreek Hill is going to have an absolutely bonkers game in this one. Don't mess around with any other options. Don't start McCole Hardman. Don't start Demarcus Robinson. Don't start Sammy Watkins. I think this game is going to be won by the big contributors, the Mark Andrews, the Travis Kelce's, the Tyreek Hills. And again, on the tight ends, it's very straightforward. You never sit Travis Kelce. You never sit Mark Andrews. 93% route participation out of Mark Andrews was great to see in week one as the number one target in this offense. That was a pretty straightforward breakdown of that game. Another pretty straightforward breakdown is the Lions at the Packers. You don't start any Lions wide receivers. Khalif Raymond, technically the wide receiver one from a usage standpoint last week, but I don't care because the target funnels in this offense are the running backs and TJ Hawkinson. So I don't really care about any of the Lions wide receivers. And on the Packers side of things, we know you obviously start Devontae Adams every single week. If somebody is worried about Devontae Adams and you can go get him for anything less than Devontae Adams' price and the best receiver in fantasy, go ahead and pounce on that. If you can turn Amari Cooper, Adam Thielen, Tyler Lockett, plus maybe a small piece into Devontae Adams, I think that is a phenomenal way to upgrade from, a great receiver to an elite receiver. I think this discount on Devontae Adams is going to end Monday night at 8 p.m. once the toe hits the leather and Lions and Packers, because I think Devontae Adams might have a 45-point game in this one because there is absolutely nobody that can cover Devontae Adams on this team. He's set to see Melifonwu in coverage with Jeff Okudah tearing his Achilles, who is their best corner on the Lions. This is going to be a complete shit stomping by Devontae Adams and the Green Bay Packers. I think they're going to take all that pent up aggression from getting destroyed by the Saints out on the Detroit Lions. I think this one could be a blowout. I think if you guys want a desperation play on Monday night, or if you're going to make a showdown lineup or something, I think Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Alan Lazard are both in good spots to maybe catch a big long touchdown in this game or something of that nature, because this Packers offense, I expect to do a lot of damage to this Lions defense. And then to close this one out, I think, obviously you start TJ Hawkinson every single week, 10 targets in this first game with the new Lions scheme. I really like the way that they were calling plays also for the Lions offense. So I really like what TJ Hawkinson's prospects are looking like going forward. I've heard a lot of people say that they might even think he's going to be better than George Kittle this year from a fantasy perspective, which I can actually get on board with, to be honest. And then Robert Tonyan had a bit of a down game, another good buy low candidate. If you wanted to go get a tight end, maybe you have Mike Gesicki or something like that, go out and acquire Robert Tonyan on the cheap, because I think what I saw from him, 65% route participation in week 1. I'm not worried about it at all. I think that number would have even been higher too if they didn't pull their starters, midway through the third or late fourth quarter, whenever they pulled them out. So those 2 tight ends should be ready to go. Now, again, if you guys enjoyed that video, if you guys enjoyed that breakdown, let me know in the comment section. Let me know any start sit questions that you have. Like the video while you're down there. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, totally free to do so. And it helps us grow. It helps us out tremendously. And again, if you guys want access to my weekly rankings, there's 3 ways you can get them. You can go to the website, purchase them for $20. You can go to patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. And for $10 a month, you'll get the weekly rankings on top of a number of other benefits, including a private Saturday live stream, which we will start rolling out as soon as we get enough Patreons to actually do one. So make sure you guys go sign up for that. And also the last way you can get it is by going to underdogfantasy.com using promo code FSE. You could also get our weekly rankings that way. So one of 3 ways that you could support us. Peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you next time.